Looking for reliable homesteading books? Today I'm sharing my reliable resources that I use and trust. I'm Christy. Thank you for joining me in my garden today. Recently, Jess from Roots and Refuge Farm shared a very important video on AI and how it's impacting the reliability of resources, especially for homesteaders and gardeners. I've placed a link to that video in the description below. She asked for creators to share a video listing their reliable resources, ones they've used and trust. I love this idea of curating a list of resources that others have used and trust. It can be so overwhelming, especially as someone new to the homesteading lifestyle, to know which resources you can trust. Jess is creating a playlist of all these videos, and I've linked to it in the description below. I'll have links to all the resources I share in the description below. Some links are affiliate links, and I will have them clearly labeled. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, settle in, and let's dive into the list. I'm starting out with gardening and permaculture resources I use and trust. The first book is Rainwater Harvesting for Drylands and Beyond, Volume 2 by Brad Lancaster. I own both volumes, but this is the one I turn to the most for understanding and creating earthworks for water harvesting in my dry desert climate. His writing is very easy to understand, and his illustrations are super helpful. Here are my key takeaways from his book. Create basins to slow the flow of water and allow it to sink into the ground for storage. Brad calls this planting the rain. The garden I'm sitting in today has a basin as its foundation. Use plant roots and mulch to encourage the water to soak into the ground for storage. Here in this basin, I've got wood chips in the pathways to encourage that water to soak in, and when a plant is done, I chop it off at the base and leave the roots in the ground. I don't dig it out. Many small water harvesting systems are better than fewer larger ones. I love this idea. It lets me add to my garden in manageable chunks. And if I make a mistake, I'm not correcting a very large area. Elevate sensitive plants that are at the bottom of the basin to protect them from large amounts of water. In this basin, I have raised beds to do just that. Install perforated vertical pipes deep into the ground to water my trees. This encourages the tree roots to grow down deep, searching for water, instead of shallow on the surface. The next book on my list is Grocery Row Gardening by David the Good. It is a small book, but it's packed with valuable information. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by permaculture, you're not alone. I know I was overwhelmed, and until I found this book, I wasn't sure how I was going to put it into practice. This book was key to opening my eyes to how I could put it into practice in my garden. I first came across David on YouTube, and I'll link to his playlist for Grocery Row Gardening in the description. Once he wrote this book, I knew I had to add it to my collection. Since water is so scarce here in the desert, I need to make sure I'm using it effectively and efficiently. David's method of combining fruit trees, perennials, shrubs, and annual crops into rows does just that and more. Here's what I learned from David. I started with a well-spaced orchard as the core structure. If for some reason I decide I don't want to grow annual crops anymore, I'm left with a functional orchard. His methods of combining fruit trees, perennials, shrubs, and annual crops into these raised beds lets me create a very diverse polyculture within a very space-efficient design. I can install an irrigation system that puts the water right onto these raised beds and lets me use it to its maximum potential. Because of David's helpful information, I know that I can trim my fruit trees and shrubs to be the size that works for my garden. I don't have to let them grow to their maximum size. It's important to keep the rows covered, even if it's just a cover crop. I need to get better at this, and that's one of my goals for this fall. I love that this method includes plants for pollinators and beneficial insects, biomass for chop and drop, cover crops to help me build my soil, and I get food out of it. Previously, I would plant row gardens with just the food in it. I didn't include all these other plants. I'm amazed at the life I see in my garden from adding all these various different plants. While I'm filming this, there's bees and hummingbirds and butterflies all around me. I love the life in my garden. The next book on my list is The Intelligent Gardener by Steve Solomon. Steve is the founder of Territorial Seeds, and he's been growing food for over 35 years. I want the food I grow to be as nutrient dense as possible, but I didn't know if my soil was up to the task. This book gave me the information on how to test my soil and take that data and create a customized amendment program just for my soil. Steve includes very helpful worksheets for so many different types of soils. It made it very easy to create a customized plan based on my own test results. I love this data-driven approach. It saves me time and money because I'm only buying and using what I need for my soil and nothing that I don't. I love books that give me the tools I need to determine things on my own. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for remineralizing your soil. The only way to know what your soil needs is to do a soil test. From my soil test, I learned my soil pH was 9. I haven't come across another creator with a soil pH that high. Because every soil is unique, what one person does for their soil may not work for me. I love that I now have the tools to design a custom amendment program that's best for my soil. The next book on my list is Carrots Love Tomatoes by Louise Riot. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. I have this book on Kindle, but I am adding the hard copy to my shelf. Because I'm planting densely in my grocery row gardens, I want to make sure that the plants that are close to each other work well together. I needed a reliable resource to help me understand what plants love each other and what plants don't, what ones help growth and what ones inhibit it, what plants help repel pests and what ones trap them to keep them away from others. And I want to attract all those beneficials and pollinators so my garden is as healthy as possible. And that's where this book comes in. I can look up specific vegetables, herbs, fruits, and even nuts and know which plants work best with each of them. There's even a section on poisonous plants, which I find important. Now, whenever I'm starting seeds for my garden, I pull out this book to see what seeds I need to start as companions. My garden's a living example of what I've learned from these books. I've used these principles to create a water harvesting basin with space-efficient and water-efficient raised beds filled with a diverse polyculture of plants. And I'm developing properly remineralized soil so my garden just gets better and better. This book is one of the first ones I bought when I decided I wanted to live the homesteading lifestyle. It's the Encyclopedia of Country Living by Carla Emery. It reminds me of the trusty old encyclopedias from my youth, the kind I'd flip through to research and learn all kinds of interesting things. Well, this book is just like that, but it's tailored to homesteading. One of the things I love the most about it is that it's like a one-stop shop for all things homesteading. While I'd love to have a library covering every possible topic, space and money just don't allow it. So when I come across a question or a topic that I don't have a specific book for, that's where this book really shines. I can turn to this like a trusty encyclopedia for answers. There have been many editions of this book, and I love that it grows and changes over time. It's a resource that just keeps getting better and better. I feel like I'm benefiting from the lessons of a homesteading journey that's been going on over time. Now let's shift into the kitchen for my tried and true resources on cooking and food preservation. I wasn't always a from-scratch cook. If it was packaged and prepared and heat and eat, it was for me. But after time I realized I really wanted to learn how to cook, especially if I was going to grow my own food. And I needed a reliable resource to help me learn. I found How to Cook Everything by Mark Bittman. His tagline of 2,000 simple recipes for great food isn't an exaggeration. It's spot on. As a new cook, I had no trouble following his recipes. I love that he uses simple ingredients and the results are delicious. What's even better is that many recipes come with variations, so with some simple substitutions, I can turn it into something completely different. And as my cooking skills improved, I didn't outgrow this book. It's a staple in my kitchen. When we downsized to a smaller house, I had to get rid of many of my books. This one made the cut. Have you ever bought a cookbook and felt like you wasted your money because you really only used 2 or 3 recipes? That's not the case with this book. It is worth the investment. And if you prefer vegetarian cooking, he makes an option that's equally amazing. My next reliable resource is The Complete Guide to Home Canning by the USDA. Canning is intimidating to me, and I knew I wanted a resource that's scientifically based and can be trusted. I was using the website that had this information, and when I found out they had a book, I knew I had to add it to my collection. This guide is packed with info to help me understand safe canning practices, water bath, and pressure canning. This book does include recipes, but for me, that's not the most important part. It gives me the knowledge to understand if a canning recipe is safe or not. There are so many canning recipes available on the internet. I love that this book gives me the tools to evaluate them for myself and decide if I want to use it or not. My next reliable resource is the Ultimate Dehydrator Cookbook by Tammy Gangloff, Stephen Gangloff, and September Ferguson. It is filled with dehydrating wisdom. I found Tammy through her videos on dehydrating, and when I found her book, I added it to my collection. For me, dehydrating is similar to canning. There's lots of safety practices you need to follow. And since I'm new to dehydrating, I need a trusted resource to guide me. And this book is that trusted resource. It gives me all the specifics I need to know for proper dehydration. How to prepare the ingredient for dehydrating. What temperature do I dehydrate it at? How do I know if it's dry? Tips and tricks and how to properly store it after it's dried. It's all here in this book. So that's my list of reliable resources for homesteading that I actually use and trust. Please check out all the other videos for reliable resources on the playlist at Roots and Refuge Farm. If you found value in this information, please let me know by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with others. Thanks for joining me in my garden today.